This year is the 50th anniversary of the Super Sentai franchise. For those who are unaware, Super Sentai is a series about a group of colorful warriors who fight against evil to protect the weak and innocent. You might be more aware of its Western counterpart, the Power Rangers, a franchise more known for its toys, but not really its games. I mean, those that exist are fun enough, but aren't really much to write home about. Although, no, that's another video for another day. For this video, I'll be reviewing an indie game where you make and direct your own Sentai, which coincidentally is also having its own anniversary this year. Chroma Squad, a tactical RPG by formerly Brazilian, now Canadian Behold Studios. It was a Kickstarter project that was successfully crowdfunded, when crowdfunding was all the rage and not just potential scams. When I first heard about this game, I was incredibly excited. I mean, the last official Super Sentai game at the time was Ranger Cross on the Wii, and my god, that's an awful looking game. Apart from that, there was also the wonderful 101, but I didn't have a Wii U. In fact, nobody I knew had one. Anyways, I was following the game's development until news came out that Saban Brands, the former owners of Power Rangers, caught wind of it. And in a massive yet unsurprising dick move, Saban Brands threatened to can the project. Luckily, things worked out and Chroma Squad was still able to be released, just as long as they put in a disclaimer saying that it was inspired by Saban's Power Rangers. And having played it again, yeah, I can see how there's quite a bit of influence from Power Rangers, but there's a lot more to it, as it's an homage to all things tokusatsu. It's been about 6 years since I last played this, and I remember liking it a lot, but never got around to trying out any of the new features such as New Game Plus. And having played it again, 3 times in a row to get all the routes, I can say that it holds up for the most part, though some aspects of the game have aged somewhat. The game begins with a group of stuntmen who are unfulfilled with the series they're working on due to many creative differences between them and the director. Having had enough, they decide to go indie and make their own production studio. At one of their members' uncle's warehouse, they find a massive prop hiding under some cloth, a massive jar with a just as massive brain inside. With Zordon, Cerebro, in their ranks, they finally get started making their Sentai production. This is where you come in. Yes, you are the director, producer, manager, PR, and HR. You are the one who oversees the entire working of the studio, the equipment, the marketing, and the sole director of the stunt team guiding them throughout each episode to increase your fan base. The team consists of 5 different roles: the lead, the techie, the assault, the scout, and the assist. One playthrough, or series, consists of 6 seasons, with each containing about 6 to 7 missions, or episodes, with the exception of the final season, which is just a movie. The first 2 seasons focus on the team trying to make their own low-budget Sentai series and establish their franchise. Things are relatively normal, but there are some strange things going on in the background. Season 3 is when the plot begins to thicken, as the company has grown large enough to catch the eye of a potential sponsor, Lord Gaga, who promises to boost your viewership and nothing else. Then, reality and fiction begin to merge, kind of like Akiba Ranger or Samurai Flamenco, where it turns out the Sentai series you're trying to make is now no longer just a show. Lord Gaga reveals himself to be an alien invader, Cerebro is not just a text-to-speech prop, and the team can transform into an actual Sentai for real. Season 5 is when the story begins to branch out, with 3 different paths to choose from, based on different Toku characters: the 6th Ranger, the Metal Hero, and the Kamen Rider path. They're not named for that, but it's pretty obvious what they're based on. The 6th Ranger path has Tammy, a girl you rescue in Season 4, trying to redeem herself after breaking free from Lord Gaga's control. The Metal Hero path has you recruit one of the 3 space sheriffs to help take down Lord Gaga, while the Rider path is a solo season, starring your assault member, who tries to rescue the others after they've been kidnapped. Plot-wise, the 6th Ranger and Metal Hero path are pretty much the same, with some differences in scenes and dialogue, while the Rider path is very different compared to the other routes, but they all link up in the end, leading to the final season, in which you go up against the invaders to finally end their tyranny. So considering that this game came out during the middle of the 2010s, its writing has aged quite considerably, partly due to the memes, which makes it read rather outdatedly. To me at least. So whether you like or hate the writing, it comes down to personal taste and how strong your tolerance is. There are also intentional grammatical errors throughout the game, which acts as an homage to older fan subs having misspellings and syntax errors. Also, there will be emoticons when a character speaks, which is meant to indicate their emotions. It works, some of the time, but I do find them rather unnecessary. Certain missions will have guest stars that will help out your Sentai. These are mostly Kickstarter backers self-inserting themselves into the game, and more often than not, feel rather out of place and awkward. Though it's not like guest characters in Sentai or Rider are any more natural. Don't get me wrong, I'm not against the idea of it, but the way the backers were included is quite jarring, making up some unnecessarily roundabout reason to explain why they're there. Although I guess I am being rather too harsh in my judgment here. Guest characters are literally one and done. They'll show up for the episode, do some text dump to explain why they're there, and why it's so important that they're there, and then they'll leave and never be mentioned again. Plus, you can fast forward through the dialogue if you're not interested in what they have to say. Personal taste aside, the main overall storyline is pretty reminiscent to an actual Super Sentai or Power Ranger season, following quite a few story beats and plots that one would see in the actual show. The story is mostly episodic with some serialized elements, though it does seem to gloss over some pretty important plot elements, such as Lord Gaga brainwashing Tammy, which kind of just happens and there's no real build up to it. But considering that this is a rather short indie game, I suppose I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that they had to cut some things here and there. Chroma Squad is a standard tactical RPG in a similar vein to the Fire Emblem or Super Robot Wars series. You control 5 rangers, each fulfilling a certain role. The lead is the all-rounder who can buff and command the team. The techie is the long-range specialist with plenty of debuffs to dish out. The assault is the damage dealer. The scout is the most dexterous, having the most base amount of movement and dodge chance. And the assist is the support who can heal and revive their team. After the tutorial, you will assign an actor for each role. You can choose whoever you want, but you might want to consider which actor is most suited for each role with the stat bonuses they have, which will be useful especially on harder difficulties. If you're wondering who to choose, well, there are guides that will explain who is best for what role. But regardless of who you choose, once you're confident with your choices, you'll finalize the main cast. Just remember, once you've cast your actors, you're stuck with them for the rest of the playthrough, even though actors get recasted a lot of the time. During an episode, each member of your Sentai will have 2 action points. Moving takes up 1 point, while attacking or using skills will take 2, or the last action point you have. Most attacks have knockback, so you want to consider repositioning your rangers before attacking, just so you can keep enemies within your range. Each ranger also has their own set of skills, some of which are free actions, which doesn't take up an action point. With each season, your team will gain a new skill slot and a skill to choose from. Generally speaking, anything that has to do with increased fans is not worth it, as the bonuses are negligible in the long run. Plus, the other skills you have available are considerably more beneficial to you, unless you want to intentionally gimp yourself for the challenge. By Season 5, with all skills unlocked, if you equip them well, you will have a near unbeatable team. The lead will become a secondary healer who can also buff the team's attack or defense. The techie will be able to reduce cooldown whenever they use their skills, or ignore cooldown entirely, allowing them to essentially use the skills every turn. The assault will become an AoE powerhouse, potentially damaging adjacent opponents with their attacks. The assist, while still relatively weaker than the others, will have a buff to their bow, making up for the lack of attack. And they will also be able to revive downed allies, and will also have a skill that temporarily turns their heals into attacks. The scout is probably the most broken, as they have an attack and a stun that's a free action, an AoE, and the ability to turn invisible, hiding from enemies and gaining a damage increase. While the scout's invisibility is removed whenever they attack an enemy, if the attack happens to kill, they'll remain invisible. Whether this is intentional or a bug, I can't really say. Every episode follows the Monster of the Week formula, and to complete an episode, or an act of an episode, you either need to finish off the main monster, defeat all enemies on screen, or survive for a set amount of turns. And sometimes a kaiju fight will occur, but I'll get to that in a bit. During each episode, there is a bar at the top of the screen. That is the audience bar, and when you pass the yellow arrows, you can press the large button at the bottom to transform. This will cause everyone to group up with the person starting the transformation, and also heal up any damage, remove any debuffs, and even revive down teammates. You can continue to increase the audience bar by defeating enemies, or performing certain actions with each team member. The lead gains audience points by performing team actions. The techie gains points by using their skills. The assault gains points by attacking. The scout gains points by moving, which increases depending on how far they move. And the assist gains points by healing. At the end of each episode, however much of the audience bar is filled will convert into a growing fanbase and salary for your studio. If any of your team happens to fall, you'll lose audience points. If your whole team falls, you will lose the round, and the episode will be delayed. Here you can choose to replay from the stage, but at the cost of some fans. During different phases of an episode, there will be optional mission objectives, called director instructions, that you can complete to gain bonus audience points. These are optional, because often you'll fill up the audience bar pretty easily, but sometimes the objectives can be a bit difficult to complete, so if you don't happen to get them, it's nothing to worry about. Though when you reach Season 4, the audience bar can get a bit harder to fill up, but you can make up for this in other ways. In this game, ending a character's turn early activates Teamwork, which I mentioned earlier. Teamwork allows for acrobatics, which can boost a fellow ranger's movement, or team attacks, which allows 2 or more members to attack an enemy, sometimes finishing them off. If 3 or more of your team attacks a boss, they'll become aggroed. For acrobatics to work, place another ranger at the edge of their movement space, then you'll be able to throw others around. For episodes that have multiple levels, namely the final level, you'll need to have a member with enough acrobatic throw range to get them up there. If 4 members are in teamwork mode, attacking with your final member allows them to perform a finisher, where your Sentai will fly into the air and fire down pillars of energy onto the boss. You can perform a more powerful finisher if everyone has a weapon equipped, are in range, and not in cooldown, combining all of their weapons into a cannon. Be careful when using these finishers, because if you attack a boss and it doesn't finish them, then you'll lose a portion of your audience bar. Like in most episodes of Super Sentai or Power Rangers, in certain episodes you also have a mech fight with the episode's boss. Mech fights are turn-based, where you have to perform QTEs to attack or block. When the game first came out, these were completely RNG based, which was rather frustrating when I played it, as you'll miss quite a bit, even if your hit chance was high. To attack, a red bar with yellow and white segments will show up. Click when the arrow is on the yellow and you'll land a hit. On white, it's a perfect hit. Click on the red, or don't click at all, and you'll miss. With each consecutive attack, your mech's accuracy will drop but will increase in damage, making your mecha more powerful but more difficult to land an attack. You can also defend, which will end your turn, but if your combo is high enough, you'll gain an increased defense bonus. When the enemy attacks, a shield will appear and a silhouette will begin to shrink. If the silhouette fits over the shield, you'll perform a perfect block, which will lessen the amount of damage you take. Though contrary to the name, it doesn't have to exactly overlap, it just needs to be close enough for it to be considered a perfect block. The best way to get it, in my experience, is to do a 3-second count the moment the shield appears. Bosses will have 3 health bars, and every time you deplete one, you'll regenerate your health. Depending on the parts your mech has, you'll have various skills at your disposal, including finishing attacks. Now while I finish summarizing the combat mechanics, there's something you need to do before any of that. Let's rewind a bit. Before an episode, you'll be in the studio doing pre-production. Here you can go to the shop to buy better equipment, or you can craft equipment yourself, with either the material dropped by enemies, from old equipment you recycle, or buy material packs in the crafting menu. The equipment you buy will have set stat upgrades, while crafting items will give randomized buffs. Whether it's better to buy or craft, it kind of depends on what you're going for. On my first playthrough, I found that you can get on by with just store-bought equipment. But on New Game Plus, crafted items do seem to have better base stats. The studio menu is where you can customize the team name and phrases, and also spend money to upgrade the studio's equipment, granting extra buffs, though at the cost of gaining less money when completing episodes. In the actors menu, you can change your team's equipment and skills, and take a look at their stats to see what you want to focus on. Stats include health, attack, weapon, movement, skill regen, as well as a chance indicator for critical attacks, dodges, and counters. Skill regen affects cooldown time of skills. By increasing a ranger's skill regen stat high enough, you can potentially lower a skill's cooldown to the point where they can be used every turn. Though there does seem to be a cap for skill regen though for balancing purposes. For example, with the assist heal, in the menu it says that their skill regen is high enough that cooldown is only 1 turn, but in missions it's still 2 turns. Ultimately, whether you want to balance everyone out or make them focus on their specialties, it's up to you to decide how you build your Sentai. The mecha menu is where you'll be crafting new and improved parts for the giant robot. When choosing parts for your mecha, make sure you take at least one part that has a finisher. Other than that, you can choose whichever part you like. The stat bonuses are helpful, but since kaiju battles now have QTEs, you can still get on by, but they do make it easier. Marketing is where you can choose which advertising agency to hire for 1 or 3 episodes, and gain various bonuses to acquire by using the amount of fan power you have. Personally, I avoided any agencies that cost me money or fans, and usually went with those who only had benefits. though that's just a personal preference. When you have more money than you know what to do with and a large fan base, you can choose whatever suits your needs. You also have emails you can respond to. Most of these are rather jokey and memey, but there are some that are pretty heartfelt. These are randomized, so some emails you might not see until you start another playthrough or New Game Plus. Pretty much you'll always want to accept their offers, or at the very least, act nice, because they'll either gift you extra equipment and items, or gain extra fans. I just want to point out though, don't do this in real life. I mean, it's possible that things will end up your way, but the chances of that happening are very slim. When you finish setting things up, you can select a new episode to record at the bottom right, which will bring up the next set of episodes to choose from. Above the episode description, there will be icons that says whether there will be a guest character or mega fight at the end. Just a quick aside, but most guest characters are not that great in a fight, but are useful for support or taking out minions. After you finish a season, you'll get a grade that will show how much money you earned during your run and how much your fan base increased. When the next season begins, you'll sign a contract, which stipulates that if your fan base drops below a certain number, you'll get axed. If you've done well in the previous season, there'll be a hype effect where you'll lose twice as many fans whenever you fail an episode. As I mentioned before, in Season 5, there is a branching path that affects how the rest of your playthrough will continue. If you save Tammy, you can either have her join your team as a 6th or choose to recruit one of the space sheriffs. Tammy is a sort of mix between a scout and an assault, even sharing the same animations with the former. She has a stance switching skill that allows her to either heal with the tiger stance or reduce cooldown with dragon stance whenever she defeats an enemy, and a torch skill that increases her dodge and counter chance. The space sheriff you choose can either give you a member who specializes in either combat, defense or healing, respectively Gavan, Shaivan, and Shaida. Personally, I went with Shaida, since you can never have too many healers. Tammy and the space sheriffs are not the most powerful, though a lot better than most of the guest characters, and are most likely overshadowed by your main team. But with the skills they have, they are quite helpful. To get onto the rider path, you must defeat Tammy, which you will have to go out of your way to do so. Here, you will only have your assault member playable for the 5th season, but you will probably get one of the best weapons in the game, the Night Cyclone, a motorcycle that allows them to transform into Kamen Rider. Transforming into a Kamen Rider, your assault will gain 3 new skills in addition to the ones they already have, all of which are free actions, allowing you to gain near total control of the field. The first is Driver Mode, which grants a 60% damage buff while increasing damage intake by 30. Also, whenever enemies are defeated with this buff, if they are next to others, it will cause a chain of explosions, killing all nearby enemies. The second is Time Gadget, a heal that also saves position of everyone in the field, reverting everyone to those positions on your next turn. Finally, the Driver Kick, a rider kick that not only moves you for free, but also damages any enemies along the way. But you do have to touch an enemy, so make sure you at least hit someone. If possible, try to land on the space behind an enemy. In short, yes, your assault member does become even more of a powerhouse than before. But the best part is that it's not exclusive to them. When you rescue your team, any of them can equip the Night Cyclone to become a rider. While the Assault gets the most benefits, I'd say the Techie is close to being the next best due to their skill regen stat and one of their skills ignoring cooldown. When you finish a playthrough, your save will start in New Game Plus, which allows you to explore the other routes, while also keeping all of your equipment and unlocked skills, as well as having new things to buy or craft, but you will need to buy your studio upgrades again, which have been adjusted to match your current budget. In addition, episodes will also be changed up a bit, with enemies and director instructions being randomized. It doesn't seem to be very balanced though, since stages will just throw out the tankier enemies at you, which can decimate you even with high-level equipment. Also, sometimes the director's instructions will bug out, changing the objectives at the last second. But even so, New Game Plus is still pretty enjoyable to play. New Game Plus Plus, on the other hand, what a fucking mess. I mean, it's perfectly fine for the first 5 seasons, but when you reach the final season, the massive steep increase in difficulty is insane, even on easy. Gaga now has over 50,000 HP, and all of the other bosses he summons have 20,000, while your team can really only deal out a couple hundred individually, maybe 1,000 if your crit chance is high enough. This means you'll have to rely on spamming debuffs and team attacks, although that is the intended strategy for harder playthroughs. But luckily, once you beat him, the worst of it is over for the most part. I mean, the final boss still has over 75,000 health, but he at least has the decency to just summon regular minions and not previous bosses. And his second phase isn't too bad, considering you also have health regen and infinite revives. Although, there's a bug with the scout that causes them to lose all of their attack, becoming literal dead weight. According to one of the developers, the game's balance was only tested with New Game Plus, since barely anyone touched New Game Plus Plus, which, if that was the case, why even add it in? The dev also said that this was the intended outcome for New Game Plus Plus, which in this case just means adding another 0 at the end of their health. I mean, it's possible to complete it, but if you value your time, I'd say it's not worth the hassle. Sorry, I just wanted to vent a bit. You have no idea how pissed I got when I found out about this, and I now realize why there's barely any information about it. Anyways, back to the review. If I had to recommend in order for you to complete the routes, start with the Rider Path, as you'll have the Night Cyclone in later playthroughs. Then, depending on your preference, you can either choose Tammy or the Space Sheriffs. Once you finish New Game Plus, just start a new save and get the last one that way. New Game Plus Plus is really not worth the hassle, though considering that's the last run for your save, if you want to, then save the Space Sheriffs for then, because you'll have 3 extra members in your team, or you can just use Cheat Engine. There does seem to be a bit of an issue with the camera. It's fine for the most part, but I do wish that there was a zoom option, because it can freak out during stages that are small, and sometimes the UI can block spaces that you want to click on. Plus, it's also rather annoying when dialogue gets cut off during cutscenes and you're unable to adjust the camera. I do like that most missions are relatively quick for a tactical RPG, especially compared to, say, the Super Robot War games, where some missions can take a while to finish, especially the late game. Compared to other tactical RPGs, Chroma Squad is not as complex. But that's not to say there's anything wrong with simplicity, as it's quite easy to pick up and play. If anything, it would be nice if a lot of things were simpler. Now, as someone who isn't great at tactical RPGs, I found the normal difficulty to be a balanced enough challenge. But if you're more adept, you might want to give the harder difficulties a try. But if at any point the game does become too difficult, or you don't want to bother dealing with the game's difficulty, you can lower it in the menu. If you had backed the Kickstarter, or bought the Collector's Edition, which you can't get anymore unless you had some other means of getting them, there were special bonuses you would have gotten. From what I've seen, you would get a new starter mission and some equipment. Other than that, there doesn't seem to be anything else. Well, according to the Kickstarter page, there are some things that non-backers will not and still can't get, such as exclusive missions and equipment. So there might be some stuff that I don't know about, but considering that I can't find any more information about these exclusives, maybe not. I've looked hard online to see what is included and have come up with nothing, except for a Steam thread where people complained about these exclusivities. It's possible that they were added into the full game later on, but again, I can't get a clear answer. In addition to the main game, there's also an episode creator, where you can create your own story within the game. And to be honest, it's not bad, but kind of bare bones and clunky to use. From what I've heard of others' experience with it, it's also quite buggy. But considering that it's free and came out when the game had stopped getting updates, I can't say that it's a surprise. Of all the aspects of Chroma Squad that could be considered to have aged poorly, the visuals is not one of them. Admittedly, there isn't much to look at. It's still quite charming. The pixel art and animations are simple but pleasing to look at. The colors are vibrant. The designs of the equipment and weapons are definitely things you could see being in an actual Toku series. I also like the variety of the boss designs, with some being very silly, some looking pretty cool. And while the minion designs are a bit limited, it's still pretty in line with Sentai and Ranger designs. I like how the crew and film equipment are also visible throughout the stages, even when it's no longer just a show. And the references throughout the game are also pretty cool to see as well. Another aspect that has aged pretty well is the music. The chiptune is pretty catchy and pretty jamming as well, especially the combat music. I won't lie, whether you want it to or not, this game's music will worm itself into your brain. There is quite a bit of variety in the soundtrack, though you'll be hearing the same songs pretty often, making it seem rather repetitive. There are 2 vocal tracks, the opening and the ending, both sung by Japanese singers and have a very distinctive Showa-esque sound. The opening is a very Showa-era Sentai opening, kind of similar to Live Man, while the ending is an 80s discotheque song, which I would say is inspired by Flashman or Kakurenger's ending songs, but I'll admit that's a bit of a stretch. Overall, Chroma Squad is a solid tactical RPG with a great Sentai theme. If you're a fan of Toku and are looking for something short and simple to play, then I recommend you give this a try. But if you're looking for a rather meaty tactical RPG like Final Fantasy Tactics or Disgaea, then you might want to temper your expectations. It's enjoyable to play, though can feel rather repetitive, especially if you do 3 consecutive playthroughs. And with a decade passing since its release, it's fair to say that there are aspects of the game that have aged quite well, and others not so much. The visuals and music still hold up, but certain gameplay aspects like the camera and the still remaining bugs, as well as certain aspects of the writing, makes this game show its age. But still, for a Kickstarter indie game, it's pretty good for what it is. If you're tempted to get it, you can find this game on sale for about $2 to $3 depending on the store, and at that price, it's not something you can really complain about. Hello again. Sorry for the long wait. A lot of things happened between now and my last video, but well, to be honest, I just got lazy. Not the most visually interesting video I've made, but it's one that I've been thinking about for a while now. I was actually aiming to put this out on the 30th to coincide with Chroma Squad's release, but I underestimated how long this video was going to be, and how long it took me to get back into the groove of things. Sorry if there's a lot of mouth noises. I hadn't recorded in a while. Also, sorry if my recording does sound weird. I was messing around with some new plugins. Might have to change that next time. Anyways, I'm not going to promise anything because I can barely keep them. But I do have a video planned for a good friend of mine, so stay tuned until then.